Live from the University of Texas at Austin, the Liberal Arts Development Studios present Essentials of AI for Life and Society. And now, here are your professors, Joydeep Biswas, Don Fazell, and Peter Stone.
Hi, welcome back to Essentials of AI for Life and Society. So today we're going to be continuing on this theme of investigating how AI is impacting, in fact, life and society. So today's topic is impacts on workplace and economics. And to talk about this topic, we're delighted to have Sherri Greenberg. Sherri Greenberg is a professor of practice and fellow of the Max Sherman Chair in State and Local Government at the LBJ School of Public Affairs. She is a professor of practice at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. Additionally, she is the LBJ School Assistant Dean for State and Local Government Engagement. Sherri is the chairperson-elect of Good Systems, which is the UT Austin Grand Challenge regarding ethical AI, which makes her the eminent speaker to talk about this topic. And her teaching and research interests include technology and socio-technical issues related to state and local government and policy. And with that, I would hand it over to Sherri.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with everyone today. And this is a topic that I love to talk about. So let's get started. Some of the questions that I want to cover in my lecture today are: what does AI mean for the future of jobs and work? What does AI mean for the future place and location of work? What does AI mean for the future economy and economics? And what is the role of policy? Let's refresh our definition of artificial intelligence, and I know this is the definition we've been using in this class. So defining artificial intelligence: a science and set of computational technologies that are inspired by, but typically operate quite differently from, the ways people use their nervous systems and bodies to sense, learn, reason, and take action. Not one thing, more than just deep learning. RL, NLP, vision, planning, symbolic reasoning, algorithmic game theory, computational social choice, human computation. Getting computers to do the things they can't do yet. Once it works, it's engineering. So with that level set, let's move on to today's topic. I want to start by going back in history to frame what has technology meant for our society, for work, for our economy. So let's start with the Industrial Revolution, or what we would call the first and second industrial revolutions, approximately 1750 to 1914. I don't think there's a definitive, specific date, but these are dates that are commonly used. What did we see? We saw technology and mechanization. We saw that people were moving from an agrarian economy with small-scale farming, and that was how society was organized as far as agriculture. And we also saw that as far as the makers in our society, they were artisan and handicraft society working from home. And we moved then from that to a society with machines. This actually began in the 1700s in Great Britain with the textile industry, and then spread to Europe and the United States. We saw that the nature and location of work changed, and hence society changed. People moved from working in small villages and homes to cities and factories, and eventually the factories automated. But what we saw in the beginning was this big migration from the villages, from working at home, from working on the small farms, to cities, to urbanization, to factories. So the Industrial Revolution, early Industrial Revolution, we saw 1764 was a big marker with British carpenter and weaver James Hargreaves. He invented the spinning jenny. And we also saw the steam engine. These were early markers with, again, the textile industry and then the steam engine. Then we moved on later in the Industrial Revolution as it moved from Great Britain to spread across to Europe, the United States, and we saw many other technologies, right? Because this was industry and technology, machines. We saw electrification, movements to coal, gas, steel, eventually the automobile, railroads, telegraph, telephone, and then factories that began automating. So not just the move to a factory, but the automation of the factory. Were there policy changes with the Industrial Revolution? Absolutely, there were policy changes because we saw that working conditions were very different and, in fact, fairly grim. When people moved from the small farms, from the villages, from artisans working at home to these factories, working conditions were rather dire. They were, in fact, stifling. And you saw a quality of life that was really unacceptable. You saw fires, you saw working conditions that, as I said, were dire, and you saw children working in these factories, all ages, all hours. So we saw quite a few policy changes and laws around factories and around working conditions in the factories. Some that were specific to the factory itself, and others that were specific to, for instance, children, with child labor laws defining the ages of children who could work, the hours that they could work, and requiring some education. And we saw an increase in attention to public education. We also saw antitrust laws, the beginning of those antitrust laws, looking to not have monopolies within these industries and factories. And we saw the rise of labor unions with these conditions in the factories and the hours, whether it was a fire, for instance, in the garment district in New York City, which was a real, as we say in public policy, focusing an event that really causes people's attention to turn. And certainly that was one of them and was really a condition and that caused people to turn to, as I said, policy changes and laws. Then we turn to what we would call the third and fourth industrial revolutions. The third industrial revolution, many people say, occurred in 1969 with the development of the microprocessor. This was followed by personal computers and digital transformation. And many people coined the fourth industrial revolution as beginning in 2016, and in fact it was coined by Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum. And with the fourth industrial revolution, we saw many things that we see today. The Internet of Things, which of course affects our daily lives, whether we're in a city government, in the private sector, whether we are using things within our homes. Robotics, of course, that we have seen increasing, and the use increasing, again, in many ways, but particularly we've seen in factories. So we move from automation in factories, where you saw with automation, belts and different mechanization within a factory, to now factories where robots are used in some of the functions, and particularly useful in some of those back-breaking, as we would say, functions. And of course, AI, artificial intelligence, we see in the fourth industrial revolution. And we see that AI, in fact, as we're discussing, is in fact continuing today. Today, many people speak of the fifth industrial revolution, with the continued development and evolution of artificial intelligence. So what do we mean by that? We mean that we've moved from the early days of artificial intelligence, and we still are, of course, seeing use of algorithms, but we have moved into large language models in addition to the algorithms, generative AI, such as ChatGPT and the other generative AIs that we see so frequently in use today, and they're in use whether we realize it or not. And then others, people are speaking about what will be the next iteration of AI. You know, will we have AGI, right? Will we have sentient? Who knows? Are we there yet? No. Could we be? I think the possibilities are rather endless. We also are seeing now discussion of policy changes. Of course, just over a week ago, on Monday, the 30th of October, President Biden released his executive order regarding AI. He had a press conference, he had a press release, there's a whole, White House website that goes into details. So there are many policy changes that he's proposing. And some of those can be accomplished with an executive order, whether it's the Department of Transportation, whether it's Homeland Security, Department of Labor. There's a long list, in fact. He also is asking for help for those who are experts in AI to come on board and educate him and others regarding artificial intelligence and the future of AI and what this could mean for work, for cybersecurity, for national security, and what this could mean for policy changes. Of course, in the European Union and the United Kingdom, we've already seen implementation of some policy changes. And we did see earlier in the fall and during the summer that Congress had hearings where various executives were invited in from the, what I would say, the large players, the large corporate players in AI and in many of the ancillary industries. But now, with the release last week of the executive order, I do think that we're moving into a new realm here in the United States of looking into policymaking. But I want to add that policymaking doesn't just occur at the federal level. In fact, the state of Texas in the last legislative session had some bills dealing with your data. And those bills to protect your data will go into effect in just a few months, or that particular piece of legislation. And there was a bill that passed in the last session of the Texas legislature that deals with how should AI be used by state agencies, because all these different departments and agencies in the state of Texas, they touch our daily lives. So how should they be using AI? And so that was another bill that passed in the Texas legislature. And that particular bill calls for the formation of a committee with appointments to it that would then give recommendations on how to use AI within state agencies. Let's turn our attention now specifically to AI, machines, humans, and work. We think of two sides of the coin, or at least I do, when I'm examining AI, machines, humans, and work. So one side of the coin is machines assisting humans. And in fact, Good Systems, which I'm now chair of, has living and working with robots. So robots would be machines assisting humans. And there are many uses in society. I already spoke about factories with machines there assisting humans by taking on back-breaking work. But I'm thinking also of many other uses. We see, for instance, in some hospitals, that robots are doing deliveries. We see that there are possibilities, particularly with in-home health care and elder care, with robots assisting humans, with lifting people, and some of those other applications that will assist the human but make life easier for the human. But what we're seeing is the machines assisting the humans. The other side of the coin is humans assisting machines. And that would be, for instance, a situation where we have smart hand tools, which is another project that we have with Good Systems. So we want to think about, there are ways in which the machines assist the human, but there are other ways in which we're not taking the human out of the equation. And I think for all of this, it's important to think of the human in the loop. So with smart hand tools, think about a situation where you still want the human to be the operator, whether you're a welder or you're working on a utility line. But these are dangerous occupations. And so you have a situation where you could have a tool that you hold in your hand. Again, think of a welder too with that helmet, and it can have sensors, and it can be enabled with feedback to help you with your work, to help you progress in your work. The same thing if you're working on a utility line. So there are two sides to this particular coin, I would say. With the future of work, it's important to contemplate, how will we work? Where will we work? What jobs will there be, and the social and political implications of these questions. And certainly, we have seen over the past few years with COVID that there have been changes in where we work and how we work. We saw in many situations people for an extended period of time were working again from home. If we go back to the Industrial Revolution, where we had the creators who were working at home, we went back to that. We went back to the future, right? We were working, many of us, from home. And so we had a change in location. We also were working virtually, and many times hybrid, which is what we have here with this class. We have students in the class, and we have many students who are virtually participating in this class. So with the future of work, how will we work? Will we work from home? Will we work in an office? Will it be hybrid, right? And with that, what kind of technology will we be using for this work? What jobs will there be? And what are the social and political implications and policy implications? Just as we saw in the Industrial Revolution, and we saw after that with further industrial revolutions, there were changes. There were changes in where we were working, how we were working, the types of jobs that we had, moving to factories, or moving to situations where we were not a maker at home, but we had a cotton gin, or we had a loom in textiles. And we saw that there were, again, social and political implications and policy changes because of the different working conditions and what that meant, not just for adults, but for instance, for children and education. The big question that I hear from many people right now is, what jobs will there be? And I think it is certainly fair to say that there are some jobs that will be on the rise and that will be increasing, and other jobs that may be obsolete or may be changing drastically in their nature and decreasing. And I think that we will see some of each. And we already have, of course, seen some of each. So what jobs are affected by AI? There are many jobs that already have been affected by AI, but I think with with some of the changes we've seen with natural language processing, with generative AI, we are seeing that there are some jobs that we would classify as professional jobs that now will see some changes. Coders, right, and some people who are doing computer programming, graphic designers perhaps, legal assistants, some accountants with, the very file my income tax, assistants. We are seeing that AI can be your assistant. Stock traders, and we've already seen technology used for better or worse in stock trading for many years, but I think we will see more of that. Financial analysts. So these are some of the jobs that I think will continue to be affected by AI. People ask, what jobs will be created due to AI? I think that we will see increasing attention, and I hope so too, ethics in AI. Good Systems is all about ethical AI at UT Austin. How can we use AI for good? And I think that AI ethics and those who focus in that area, whether they're in the academy or public or private or nonprofit sectors, that will be a job that I think will be created. Supply chain analyst, because we're going to see AI being used more and more with these difficult supply chain issues, but we still need the analysis. And this is something that I want to focus on, as you can see. An AI cybersecurity analyst. Yes, AI can certainly be helpful with cybersecurity, but we still need that analyst. Healthcare, we've already seen, of course, with COVID-19 and with the very rapid production of vaccines, that AI was significant, but you still need those analysts. AI robotics manager. You may have a robot, but you still need a human assisting that robot and managing it. AI data manager. Certainly we know that AI can sift through mountains of data, and we've seen that in healthcare with disease detection, that would not be possible with a human. But again, you still need a manager of that data. Will there be workplace changes? I think that we must turn our attention to the workplace, not just because we've had changes with COVID and with some people in hybrid work or virtual learning and working, but because AI does have the potential to make a lot of changes in the workplace. Some of that we've already seen, right, with hiring. And we've had a lot of discussions about bias in algorithms, I know, previously. And this is a real issue in AI and hiring. An example that I would give is with a police force. Let's say that the police force wants to hire a new cadet class. Those are the folks who come in to be trained to be police officers. And let's say that the police force wants to diversify the cadet class, to have a larger cadet class and have more people who may not have thought they could be cadets before entering this workforce. If what you do is only feed into the algorithm their characteristics of the cadets you've had previously, then that algorithm in hiring is going to weed out anybody who's different, right? And so you're not going to get the success perhaps you want in having a larger cadet class. So that would be an example of things that we have seen in hiring, and we will continue to see AI used in hiring, and we need to continue to pay, of course, attention to those algorithms. Performance evaluation. Is AI going to be doing your performance evaluation? If so, what does that mean? And how can that affect, in fact, your standing within your workplace? AI assistance, I mentioned, and this can be something where you have no longer a human who's an assistant to you at an entry level, but AI is performing those tasks. Certainly there are questions with privacy, right? If you are using a smart hand tool, let's say, and data is being collected on your performance as a welder, as somebody working on the utility line. Who owns that? Who has the agency of that data? And then, again, intellectual property, which goes hand in hand with what I was saying. There's the privacy, and then who has the ownership of that data? Is that your intellectual property? Does that belong to your employer? There's a whole ecosystem in the workplace that we need to pay attention to with AI. What are the skills that we need if we are thinking about the workplace and work in the future with AI? And I think first and foremost, it's analytical abilities. You saw that on a prior slide, I was talking about analysts, different types of analysts, because we still need people who can analyze a situation, data, and so those analytical abilities, I think, are going to be extremely important. The ability to learn, to know how to learn and how to think. Because as we are here today, society is changing, and technology is changing, and that will only continue. So the ability to learn, to think, to synthesize information, to think analytically, and to use those analytical abilities, I think, is going to be a highly prized skill. Also, the ability to upskill and reskill, to be able to be agile, to pivot, to learn either at a higher skill level or to learn new skills. And I think that goes hand in hand with the ability to learn and to think. What does AI mean for the economy? So, you know that if you ask two economists the same question, you'll get two different answers, right? There is no single answer to, I believe, what AI means for the future of the economy. Some economists would say that AI will boost productivity, and with greater productivity, that will be a boon to the economy, right? Because we will be more productive, we will be more efficient, GDP, gross domestic product will increase, and therefore we will have a better situation as far as the economy. However, some would say that perhaps AI will cause a decrease not just in specific jobs, but overall jobs. And if that were to happen, then perhaps it's not the boon to the economy or not the boon for everyone in the economy. And I think a question that many are asking is, will labor have a voice, right? Will those who are workers in the economy have a voice if they are seeing that jobs are either changing or increasing or decreasing? And as we look to what that means to efficiency in the economy, and not just to gross domestic product, but what it means to those who are actually working in the economy, and what it means to the overall living wage and quality of life, and what it means as far as people's, again, ownership over their data. So we know that there has been a lot of discussion out in Hollywood and Los Angeles with actors and writers, right, regarding who owns their image and likeness, who owns replication of their voice or their image. And I think that we will continue to see these kinds of questions in the economy. Who owns this? Who profits from it, right? And so these are important, I believe, questions to consider as we look to the future of AI and what it means overall in our economy. So, of course, being someone who likes data, I can't help but end with a poll. This was a poll that was in just a couple months ago by Pew, and the question was, most Americans believe AI will decrease the number of jobs in the U.S. In your opinion, what type of effect will artificial intelligence have on the total number of jobs in the United States in the next 10 years? And I'm trying, the overall takeaway from the poll was that, in fact, more people today believe that AI will have an effect on their jobs than just a couple of years ago. With that, I will let you turn your attention to the quiz.
All right. Thanks, Sherri, for the really thought-provoking talk. And you raised a lot of questions, and I think you also addressed a fair number of them. But there's yet more coming in.
Wonderful.
So for everybody joining us online, there is a chat button. You should use that to answer questions. But to kick us off, actually, there's an in-person question. Do you want to go for it?
So the development of AI grows at an accelerating rate every day. How will regulation be able to keep up with the current rate of development? And is there a plan in place to ensure ethicality and responsibility with AI?
Regulation is a good question because not all policies are regulations. And with policies, you have more flexibility. A regulation is a law that is passed at the federal level, at the state level, and to change it, you have to have people who've been elected make changes. Policies can be at the level of a department and can be more flexible. And so that is one way to address the rapid change, is to have more flexibility with those who are in the agencies making policies rather than doing everything via elected officials with a statute. As far as the ethics, certainly I think that this is a very important facet, not just now, but going forward when we consider AI, because there are so many applications that we would, I think, have to ask, is this ethical? There are so many situations where would you want a robot doing this autonomously versus a human, for instance, if you were looking at a war situation. So that would be an example. But there's also the ethics around privacy, transparency, using people's data. These are all important ethical questions that I do think we need to start addressing yesterday.
So, Sherri, related to this question, I think you alluded to the fact that we are going to see economic impact. And actually, a great question that was raised in the chat essentially is this: with this new technology, people often claim that increased efficiency will lead to greater creative freedom for displaced workers. And the concern is that while that's true to some extent, it also feels like the economic benefits are potentially unequally distributed and tend to accrue more strongly for capital owners. So do you think there's, what policy changes would you have in mind to address these issues?
This is a really good question. And certainly if we look back in history, we can see that there were situations with the Industrial Revolution where people maybe had more jobs, but their quality of life was diminished. Or we saw during the robber baron days, right, where you had a few people becoming very wealthy, but not the workers. Today, I think when we're looking at, interestingly enough, something such as ChatGPT, we certainly have to, and algorithms with bias, we certainly have to look at bias, we have to look at equity, and interestingly enough, what we may be seeing, again, with generative AI is that workers who are not earning as much money may, in fact, have safer jobs because they're not as easy to replace with generative AI. We could see a situation where more knowledge workers will find that their jobs are changing a lot, or in fact, that they're having to reskill or upskill.
Right. So, so clearly you've alluded to the fact that there will be new policy changes, and which is inevitable. So for someone who's interested in this or wants to take like a leading role in like driving the policy change, what do you see as being like the correct college or educational background for that someone should have to be the correct person to be involved in this policy making?
I don't think there's just one education or background that's appropriate. I can think of many educations and many backgrounds and many degrees, undergraduate and graduate. And that is because I believe that education as far as AI and ethical AI should begin early on. Unlike what we saw perhaps with social media and being very behind the curve, with education. I think this should start in elementary school and continue all the way through PhDs, continue into people's lives out in the community. You know, I think that your education starts the day you're born, and it should not end till the day you're no longer on this earth. I also believe that if we have this throughout the curriculum, we will have people in many disciplines with many different points of view who can work in an interdisciplinary manner, because I think that these questions call for people working together in an interdisciplinary manner, whether they're in liberal arts or computer science or public affairs or communications. There's a place for you, and the same with graduate degrees. You could be getting a graduate degree in engineering, computer science, public affairs, communications, urban planning. There's a role, I believe, for disciplines, and not just a role, but I think a necessity. We must have the disciplines working together.
All right, so you spoke about these different disciplines and different roles working together. Now let's talk a little bit more about the human element. So you discussed a little bit about there being hybrid models of work, or and just like we're doing education.
Right.
So what is the question is, like, what is the role of the human factor here? So for example, like some people are questioning whether there's emerging evidence which suggests like virtual engagement is maybe neurologically deficient experience. The human connection is still relevant, and also the fact that you know, some people believe that when we're talking about like you know, going to a store and like talking about like the human element is kind of important. Do you think that people over or underestimate the extent to which people require this human connection?
There are experts and whole bodies of research and literature in this, and certainly having that human interaction, if you look at the research by those who are professionals and academics and researchers in these fields, you see a lot of evidence for that. And you particularly see that as people age. There's a lot of research and data showing that as people age, they really need to have that sense of community. They need to have that human interaction. And so I think it is important that we do not lose that, and that we keep the human in the loop, that we keep that sense of community, and that particularly as people age, it becomes increasingly important, but not just as people age. We've seen now at the other end of the, as we say, of the continuum with COVID, what this meant for many children, for many young people who all of a sudden did not have that social interaction, were solely at home, their education was solely at home, and you know, there are some people who learning online and virtual learning was advantageous. They may have had limitations that made it advantageous. But there were other people, and whether they were children or young adults or others, that, you know, felt a sense of isolation, a loss of connection. So these are very important, you know, aspects that we have to pay attention to.
All right. So it's almost like you're answering the questions in a manner that like flows with each other, but like related to this, there's something else that comes up is essentially, you spoke about the need for like elder care, or this raises the question in jobs like social work. How will AI affect, how do you envision AI affecting these jobs?
In a job such as social work, I do not see, at least now or in the near future, for instance, AI necessarily replacing the social worker, the psychiatrist, the counselor, the psychologist. There are some situations now, though, where people will communicate with AI regarding a personal situation. Maybe it's a hotline. So we are seeing that in some situations now, perhaps with hotlines or some specific situations where people need help. Overall, I don't think we're going to see, as I said, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the social worker. What I do think we could see, though, is in some of these situations, particularly as I was talking about, in home health, where somebody is homebound, where they are perhaps in a wheelchair and situations like that, or elderly and having difficulty, that you can have, for instance, robotics or robot that is assisting that social worker, that home health care worker with some of these very physically, frankly, debilitating tasks, so that you don't see that social worker, that home health worker ending up, for instance, with back problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So coming back to some of your early slides, actually, so you started discussing how there's been, I guess you called it like 5 industrial revolutions. And there was a question which showed up related to that, but I have to ask you. So we've seen several of these industrial revolutions. What's new? What's different? And is this inevitable? Like, will there be a 6th one? Can we learn something? What can we learn from the past?
I think we can learn a lot from the past, and that's why I wanted to turn our attention to it in the back, in the beginning, because I do think that we should learn from history. And we don't have to be specific, whether it's 4 or 5, people combine the first and second, but looking at these different stages of our history and what new technologies meant, I think, is what's important. And what can we learn from that? What can we learn from that as far as some of the issues we've talked about? What does it mean to the workplace? What does it mean to humans, to society? Do I think that technology will continue to evolve and there will be yet another industrial revolution? Yes, I do.
Oh. So, okay, in that case, in many of these industrial revolutions, the conflict has been the difference between individual versus society. So I think a lot of people do believe like society ended up better off eventually from the industrial changes, but the question is, for individuals, the answer was not quite the same. So what can we do to bridge the gap? Like, and if you're saying like the 6th one is inevitable, how do we make sure that this gap is not quite as big?
We do need to bridge the gap. And I think when we look back at the Industrial Revolution, there was a significant gap, and it took years, right, for policy to catch up with that gap. And so we need to learn from that. We need to be thinking right now, what does this mean to the individual? Clearly, in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there was no thought to that. There was no thought to what was it going to mean to a person, we're talking about people here, who was no longer at home with the family. Now this person is not at home. This person is in an urban environment. They're alone. They're working in a factory under stifling conditions, right? And it took a while to catch up to that, I would say. So now we need to be thinking right now about what this means to people, to the individual person.
All right. So on the theme of now watching out for the future, so we've seen a lot of examples of how use cases of AI have shown to have negative consequences, and after the fact, we've been catching up to them.
Right.
Can you provide some guidance or some insight on how do we not catch up to things and we head them off?
I'm certainly hoping that the attention that we have seen globally can accelerate that. As I said, whether it was the EU, UK, now with President Biden's executive order. And I'm hoping that, as I mentioned, that we learned from social media, that there was not the attention to social media. So I'm hoping that we've learned from that. I'm hoping that globally we are not just seeing, pages with words, but that we are actually seeing implementation of, whether it's policies or within industry, there are steps that we need to take. Everyone needs to take some responsibility for this. As a parent, I need to take responsibility. As educators, as people in industry, in academia, in the government, in nonprofits, everybody needs to take responsibility for this.
Right, that's a great point. And actually, I want to resonate the fact that this is actually part of the reason why we have this class, right. So that because we believe everybody should be conversant about AI and actually be thinking about how that affects life and society. So let's see. So we spoke a lot about how AI is impacting the workplace and economics. So let me thank you again, Sherri, for the wonderful presentation and raising all of these conversations.
My pleasure.
Yep. And what we're going to do is that next week we're actually going to look at another topic related to some of these questions that we've raised, including AI alignment and making sure that it's aligned with what we want, and existential threats. And this topic is going to be presented by Scott Aronson. So we hope to see you all next week. Thank you.